Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Open University.
Hello, Namaste students. I am Dr. Deep Trivedi. I am Associate Professor of English at Indian Institute of Teacher Education, Gandhinagar. I, on behalf of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University and the PG program, MA in English, on behalf of that, I welcome you all to this class. Today we are going to discuss one of the most significant of the texts in the literary theory and criticism, that is the Poetics by Aristotle. Friends, when we talk about Aristotle's Poetics, its very worth is confirmed through the fact that it is through this text that the actual literary dialogue opens in the form of criticism. It has the relevance and thought that holds an exclusive privilege within the dialogue of criticism. Here is Aristotle, as you can see, the one who is responsible for the first systematic work of literary criticism, and that is where the credit lies. Yes, this was the first authentic reference that can be taken up as the initial studies into literary genres. Aristotle, who was born in the year 384 and had lifespan till 322 BCE, was also the founder of literary criticism, also regarded as the master of those who know. And that itself gives him the real credit that he is treated as someone who has, who has shared his thoughts over anything that lies beneath the sun. That is how we regard him, as someone who knows on plenty of subjects. Plato referred to Aristotle as the mind, and that was the recognition from the side of his teacher. These many subjects he has explored through physics, biology, zoology, metaphysics, logic, ethics, aesthetics, poetry, theatre, music, rhetoric, linguistics, politics, and government. If we talk about the text in specific reference, it is basically holding 8 different parts of our interest. In total, it has 26 parts, but then 8 parts being primarily very important to us. They include his basic introductory remarks on poetry and its classification, his views and his very connect with the genre, that is tragedy, poetic diction, narrative poetry and tragedy, epic and its comparison with the tragedy, even objections, the way he attempted to answer with reference to the attacks made by Plato on poetry. In total, if we see, the text comprises of 26 chapters, and it is seen sometimes as a kind of covert reply to his great master, Plato. It is treated as and regarded as a systematic exposition of the theory and practice of poetry. And of course, it is also treated as a response to Plato's attack on art, poetry in general. There were genuine differences between Aristotle and Plato when it came to poetry. Poetry was taken as a common noun for all the forms of literature. So then references in terms of poetry refer to almost all the forms of literature, the ones which existed during those days. So Plato considered imitation merely as mimicry. We have studied this into earlier lecture, that Plato has regarded imitation merely as mimicry or servile copy of nature, while putting forward his views on poetry. He also compared poetry to painting, and that is where the distinction comes in reply through Aristotle, when he says that he interpreted it as a creative process and not as mere imitation or mimicry of some random or uh, abrupt style. It has the creative process as its basis, and Aristotle also compared it to music and not to painting. The Poetics can be studied and can be referred as scientific study of the constituent parts of poetry and drawing conclusions from those observations. You see, it has come through close observations on literature in general. So he lists the different kinds of poetry that include epic poetry, tragedy, comedy, dithyrambic poetry, and most of the flute playing and lyre playing genres. We should know that these genres existed with exclusive usage during those days. Next, he classifies all of these kinds of poetry as mimetic or imitative, but that there are significant differences between them. If we look at his concern, you see objects, manner, and medium of imitation in tragedy. Because his prime focus was on tragedy, if we see the text, his reflections were very much in this nature that objects, if you take them, they should contain serious action. That is what he advocates. He emphasizes on serious action, the acknowledgement to serious action, with again going back to manner of presentation, emphasizing on representation through action. And of course, medium should be verse in dialogue. He often states through the text that we are by nature imitative creatures that learn and excel by imitating others, and we naturally take delight in works of imitation. So that's very common to humankind, to human race, that we take delight in works of imitation, and in any case it would be exaggeration to call it mere mimicry. So he does not limit that process as a mere act of mimicry. He advances further when he states that there is an evidence also that comes through him, that we are often fascinated by representations of dead bodies or disgusting animals, even though the things themselves would repel us. But then we learn by examining representations and imitations of things. Now, the word things is something that is to be taken in general context, and of course, exactly in that connection, we have to see representations and imitations of things. So, things, they are very much a part of continuous process of learning, and that cannot be excluded. And learning is one of the greatest pleasures. That is how he emphasizes his viewpoint, that it's an act of learning, and that is certainly something which fulfills the very essential criteria of delight when it comes to human lives. Rhythm and harmony, they also come naturally to us, so that poetry gradually evolved out of our improvisations with these media. So he does not exclude even the matters concerning the thoughts on rhythm, harmony within any formation of text or any formation of literary product. The idea of harmony within thought process, these are all natural to us, and poetry gradually evolved out of our improvisations with these medias. Tragedy and comedy are comparatively later developments that are the grandest representations of their respective traditions. You see, they have formulated their own traditions, and that should not be negotiated. You see, tragedy holds altogether lofty tradition, which is elevated in its own stature and right. And if you talk about comedy of of the time. The way he reflects upon the word comedy, the way he comments upon the genre of comedy, he refers to it as mean tradition. So there are two traditions represented through two different genres of drama: tragedy of the lofty tradition and comedy of the mean tradition. Comedy deals with the ridiculous, which he defines as a kind of ugliness that does no harm to anybody else, but again, it does not have that strength that the tragedy produces. We are going to discuss tragedy in detail today, because that is one of the chief concerns within the context. Very sketchy account of origins of comedy he happens to mention, because it was not generally treated with the same respect as tragedy, and so there are fewer records of the innovations that lead to its present form. The present form, of course, has its modern reference. It has changed into altogether a different shape, but then initially it has evolved through a number of you can say innovations that came through different traditions of time. Tragedy and epic poetry, they deal with lofty subjects in grand style of verse. So tragedy and epic do have some connection. However, when it comes to the comparison of the two, he holds a different view. But tragedy and epic, when it comes to the commonness, he emphasizes that they deal with lofty subjects in a grand style of verse. Three significant differences he happens to enlist. First, tragedy is told in a dramatic rather than narrative form. And employs several different kinds of verse, while epic poetry employs only one. Second, the action of a tragedy is usually confined to a single day, and so the tragedy itself, is usually much shorter than an epic poem. So again, there comes the context of unity of time also. We will talk about that also in the today's class. Third is a reference that to tragedy has all the elements that are characteristic of epic poetry. It also has some additional elements that are unique to it alone. So he narrows his focus to examine tragedy exclusively within the text, and that will be our focus of discussion in the talk further. So in order to do so, he provides us a definition of tragedy that we can break up into 7 different parts. It's quite comprehensive. The definition has number of phrases collected together in so much so effective way that it has been treated as the only compact definition of tragedy. So according to Aristotle, it involves mimesis. Tragedy is serious when it comes to its action, course of action, the application of action. The action is complete and with magnitude. Certain magnitude is emphasized. It is made up of language with the pleasurable accessories of rhythm and harmony. Further, these pleasurable accessories are not used uniformly throughout, but are introduced in separate parts of the work, so that, for instance, some bits are spoken in verse and other bits are sung. So, this very use of accessories is the effect, that is an additional effect compared to epic, that makes tragedy special. Sixth, it is performed rather than narrated. So the criteria is, or you can say extra emphasis is on performance and not on narration. The 7th point of reference is, it arouses the emotions of pity and fear and accomplishes a catharsis, that is the purification or purgation of specific emotions, the way they are demonstrated through performed stage or performed drama. This is the complete definition in front of you, students. Tragedy is an imitation of an action, serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude in a language beautified in different parts with different kinds of embellishment through action and not narration, and through scenes of pity and fear, bringing about catharsis of these emotions. So, purification is the ultimate result. That is something which we can refer to. Action must be complete. When he says that action must be complete when it comes to tragedy, he says that it should have appropriate beginning, it should swiftly move to the middle part, and of course it should conclude with convincing end. Now this reference is made with connection to his thought on plot as one of the most important elements in any form of literature, specifically in tragedy. While referring to the word completeness, he refers to this chart, that plot with unity of action would appear in this form. It should have appropriate beginning with some rising amount of complication, rising action, which is also known as dasis. It reaches to climax, the highest phase of conflict in the presentation, and once it reaches to climax, the middle part, it has denouement, that is falling action, which resolves all the conflicts and brings about the conclusion to drama. When we talk about unity of action, which refers to probability and necessity, he emphasizes, as against plurality of action, as it weakens the final effect of tragedy. So he emphasizes on few points that there must be a causal connection between the various events and incidents. They should be well hung, they should be linked well. They must follow each other naturally and inevitably. It should not have any abrupt associations, it should go with some flow which appears to be natural and also required one, not evitable one. No incident or characters should be superfluous, and the events introduced must be such as are probable under the circumstances. So it should match the climate of the drama, the way it is taking shape. So unity of action is the convincing ground on which he emphasizes more. Imitation of an action, when you talk about its completeness, or seriousness and magnitude, it comes through certain, certain clarifications, like it must be long enough to permit an orderly development. He emphasizes on the very concept of orderly development of the drama. All right, action to a catastrophe. Too short an action cannot be regarded as proper and beautiful, for its different parts will not be clearly visible, as in the case of very small living creature. It must be an organic whole. So the structure should complement the very thought, the length and magnitude as in well formed connection. So the wholeness is maintained, the impact is generated in complete form, in complete sense, and also in the essence also it maintains the intactness of the weight of thought. And another important word is embellishment. He uses this is something we should keep a separate note on, that embellishment he refers to by stating that verse and song beautify and decorate and give pleasure, but Aristotle does not regard them as essential or indispensable for the success of a tragedy. So this is where he clearly defines this. You should remember that he clearly defines that verse and songs may be used to beautify or decorate the very concept or effect of pleasure within the drama, but he does not regard them as essential or primarily required for the success of tragedy. So he does not weigh them much. He uses diction and style also as one of his key concerns. He says that when you talk about diction, it is the choice and arrangement of words. and images in literary composition. So diction should be handled carefully, because it is through those specific choice of words the desired amount of uh, persuasive result is obtained. So there are 6 types of words he largely describes into this process. Is, they include current or ordinary words, foreign terms, borrowed, or dialects, maybe from some other geography, metaphors, ornamental periphrases or invented words, not invented but made new, lengthening or shortening. Some edit is also feasible, but diction and style should be such that they appear to be enough convincing. Songs or melody, they are pleasurable addition. Students, you have to remember this, that it is treated as an addition when it comes to emphasis through a person like Aristotle, a teacher like Aristotle, that they are the songs are the pleasurable addition to a play. In a tragedy, song is provided by the chorus. Chorus used to play a very important part in the performances of drama, particularly in tragedy. The quantitative sections of tragedy are prologue, choric song, episode, and exode. Regarding catharsis, which is again one of the most important of the terminology that he emphasizes upon, the very important event which results through the very performance of the drama, that in the Poetics, while defining tragedy, he makes this special reference, that he says that the function of tragedy is to arouse the emotions of pity and fear, and in this way to affect the catharsis of these emotions. Further, the Greek word catharsis has 3 meanings: purgation, purification, and also clarification. So when you use the word catharsis in the given context of tragedy, it's all about when when the audiences, when they experience what the characters, the way, or the players, the way they are performing on stage, the kind of emotions the audiences feel in connection to empathizing the characters on the stage, there takes place these 2 effects of pity and fear, as due to some weakness of the character who is basically or essentially good in conduct happens to suffer through in tragedy and meets the downfall. Now this may lead to some kind of emotional response in the form of weeping also. Now weeping is some kind of purification. If you take it, you feel better when you cry, right? Purgation is the same emotion. You experience through purgation that you are relieved through those burdened emotions. So these 2 things are very important when it comes to arousal of certain emotions in the form of pity and fear. The characters on the stage, when they make mistakes, you do realize that if we also make such mistakes, we will meet the similar hazardous results. And you also feel pity for the ones who are by conduct and by character humble, and still, because being tragic characters, they suffer through the entire drama. So this connect of audience with the characters allows them to reach to this emotional purgation, that is catharsis. It has both the spellings as accepted, starting with C and starting with K. Having examined the definition, nature, and function of tragedy, Aristotle comes to its formative parts. They are loosely treated as or called as elements of tragedy. They include plot, character, diction, thought, spectacle, and song. All these 6 elements stand as unique and very important. Talking about the plot, he lists 2 kinds, simple and complex. According to him, simple plot is when the change in the fortune of the hero takes place without peripety and discovery. When we talk about complex plots, the plot is complex when it involves one or the other or both. The peripety is the change in the fortunes of the hero, and discovery is change from ignorance to knowledge. He prefers complex plot. To be more specific, Aristotle emphasizes on the use of complex plot, for it startles and also captures attention. Complex plots are those which have peripety and anagnorisis, or discovery or recognition as their impacts. You see, peripetia means that uh, that human actions, they produce results exactly opposite to what was intended. It is working in blindness to one's own defeat, right? And it is basically, it is a false step taken in the dark, when you are not enough certain about certain things. And that you could easily exemplify through the drama that is Macbeth, another remarkable work by Shakespeare. You see, anagnorisis, or recognition, is the realization of truth, and that comes too late when it comes to tragedies, and by that time the downfall of the character or the tragic hero has already started. So the opening of eyes, the sudden lightning flash in the darkness, is so one represents the experience of being blind in one's own defeat, and the other one reflects on something that we call the sudden spark of realization or sudden lightning flash in the darkness. Characterization, while referring to that component or that element, he says that showing a perfectly good man passing from happiness to misery. That is how the tragic characters are formulated. So such kind of plot will not inspire pity and fear. It will be simply odious or horrible. Showing bad man rising from misery to happiness, it is not tragic at all, because you don't connect with the bad man's conduct. You would hardly feel pity, or you would hardly be frightened by consequences in the life of a bad man. See, perfectly good man, as earlier discussed, uh, they are essentially good and perfectly good. So happiness to misery in such kind of condition may not exactly uh, it may not exactly spark the very element that of arousing pity and fear. The ideal one, according to Aristotle, is showing uh, you know showing that kind of emotional connect that would come through essentially a good man who suffers through certain experiences, uh, surrounded by miseries of different kind, attempting to come out of it, failing to do so, meeting to its downfall. That troubles the emotions of audiences also. So showing an extremely bad man, the third stage as mentioned here, showing an extremely bad man falling from happiness to misery, it will move us neither to pity nor fear. So that does not meet the criteria. So if you see the characterization, there is an emphasis that a man who is not eminently good, and just yet whose misfortune is uh, the misfortune is compromise brought by vice or depravity, but by some error or frailty. So because of some loophole in the character, or because of certain limitation, the character has to suffer through. Essentially, a good man having one or two limitations within certain criteria, putting him into big trouble, meeting the downfall, passing through a very bad phase in the life. These are the things that are the cause of uh, arousing those emotions of pity and fear. The further traits of characters include that the characters must be good, they must be appropriate, they should be appropriately presented and defined, they must have likeness, they must have consistency. So he has a special reference to make when it comes to his enlisting or preferring the characters. The ideal tragic hero, the way Aristotle tries to explain, is that he should neither be perfectly good nor utterly bad. There is some flaw in his character, essentially a good man, but with some flaw in his character demonstrates the quality of an ideal tragic hero. He should be a man neither of blameless character nor a deprived villain. Right? He should be a man neither of blameless character nor a deprived villain. So these are the references he happens to make while referring to the ideal of tragic hero. He is ideal tragic hero. He is a man of ordinary weaknesses and virtues like ourselves. That is where the connect can be established, and leaning more to the side of good than of evil. So you do realize, you do feel for the character only when you do realize the pain of that character, or you do feel for that character only when you realize that they are very much in resemblance to the common people or the audiences sitting there in the stands. The suffering is caused not because of some deliberate villainy, but because of some flaw or error of judgment, some flaw of his own character or error of judgment. And this is something that comes into role, that is hamartia, that is due to ignorance. Due to ignorance, Oedipus the Rex is the drama that comes into appearance. Hasty or careless view is often exemplified through the character of Othello, and decisions, they are taken voluntarily, and that comes through the well appreciated drama so far, that is Hamlet. We should understand that hamartia is the tragic flow, through which the suffering is caused, and that is due to some kind of limitation or moral. It's not exactly a moral imperfection, but a kind of normal imperfection that causes this suffering in case of the hero. Further, he talks about the unities. They include unity of time, place, and action. While comparing, now let us go back to his comparisons on epic and tragedy. Tragedy tries as far as possible to live within a single revolution of the sun, or only slightly to exceed it, whereas the epic observes no limits in its time of action. So course of action, the way it is demonstrated on the stage through tragedy, includes a day in general sense, if we try to understand, whereas when you talk about epic, it has no limits. It's huge, it's grand, it's timeless, it's not time bound literally in its narrative reference. So about unity of time, he merely says that the poetics, that tragedy should confine itself as far as possible to a single revolution of the sun. And that is the only important remark he happens to make. That is, in loose reference, we can say that he refers to the course of action in terms of time as a day. Unity of place, if we emphasize, he only mentions when comparing the epic and the tragedy that the epic can narrate a number of actions going on simultaneously in different parts, while in drama such simultaneous actions cannot be represented, for the stage is one part and not several parts or places. Stage technically may be divided into three different zones, but then stage is one place, and you should maintain the harmony or sequence of events that complement to the presentation on one place, It should be demonstratable, or it should be presentable within that premise or space. So place is important, the location is important. In epic, that may that may have number of places within its narration. Unity of action, it refers to tight plot, not episodic, not literally episodic events. The events have the logical connectedness, so they complement to each scene within the formation of different acts. There are types of tragedies, and they include complex tragedy, tragedy of suffering, tragedy of character, tragedy of spectacle. These all have their exclusive points to make, and that is what he tries to explain and examine here through enlisting them all. Complex tragedy consists of reversal and recognition of truth, whereas tragedy of suffering, it depicts suffering literally. And a tragedy of character, if we say, it refers to more evolved than plot. Character is more evolved, and not the other aspects like plot even. The focus is on character. And tragedy of spectacle depends upon the sensational effects which are produced by actors, the costume designers, and other mechanical and artificial devices. So that uses a different sense of appeal and magnitude in its overall presentation. Types of recognition, if we see, they include, I mean, by recognition we mean to say recognition of truth or discovery, anagnorisis, that the way we talked about it earlier. They include signs or objects, symbols through the text. Of course, we have to perceive and identify those, or you can say we have to discover through the text how exactly and where the symbols are placed or signs are put. Sometimes even author tells himself. Discovery from memory, process of reasoning, that is also included, and discovery arising from the false reasoning. So these are the places through which recognition of truth is extracted. Superiority of tragedy over epic. He clearly emphasizes the fact that tragedy should be ranked over epic in as far as its overall impact is concerned. It has all the elements of an epic, and has and also has the spectacle and song which the epic lacks. Actually, epic is limited in its impact, whereas tragedy in that sense explores more. Unity of action only in tragedy, not in an epic. Epic compromises on this part. He does say that simply reading the play without performing it is already very potent. You see, even reading through the text can bring you to those visions of, you can say, literal performances. Sometimes you get to have the sense of characters, and you are exposed to number of things. Even scrolling through those pages would also help you. So tragedy is shorter, that is more compact and concentrated effect. So his reference is to the aspect of brevity also, that within very short structured literature piece, a different impact, or you can say altogether a great meaningful and contextual performances are put in performance. So tragedy is more elevated, and it is more impactful compared to epic. That is what he exclusively believes in. We have been through the general reference to what we have been interacting upon. So friends, after having discussion on the Poetics as a text, there are few conclusions that we should remember, and we may even take a note of, that it should be treated as a seminal work in literary theory and criticism that was written many years back. That was probably 4th century BCE. And it is a collection of lectures and notes on the art of poetry and drama that Aristotle delivered to his students at the Lyceum in Athens. The text is divided into 8 chapters, each of which explores a different aspect of the art of poetry. It is considered one of the most important works on literary theory, and its insights into the nature of poetry and drama have had a profound influence on Western literature, of course. The first chapter of the Poetics discusses the definition of poetry, which Aristotle defines as the imitation of an action. And according to Aristotle, as we studied earlier, poetry imitates human action, but not just any action, but rather significant and complete actions. He also introduces the concept of mimesis, which is the imitation or representation of reality in art. In the second chapter, Aristotle discusses the various forms of poetry and unities of 6 genres: epic, poetry, tragedy, comedy, dithyrambic poetry, pastoral poetry, and satirical poetry. He provides detailed descriptions of each genre, outlining their characteristics and identifying their origins. The third chapter is dedicated to the essential elements of a tragedy, which Aristotle identifies as plot, character, thought, diction, melody, and spectacle. He argues that the most crucial element is the plot, which must be unified, complete, and have a beginning, middle, and an end. The characters must be well drawn. If we talk about the characters, if you recall, they should also be realistic and capable of eliciting the audience's emotions. The thought or the theme of the play should be universal and meaningful, while the diction or language should be appropriate to the characters and the situation. Melody and spectacle, which refer to the music and visual elements of the play, they are of secondary importance. So he does not put much emphasis into the melody part. The fourth chapter of the Poetics explores the nature of tragedy in more detailed discussing its purpose, structure, also emotional effect on the audience. Aristotle argues that tragedy is intended to arouse pity and fear in the audience, thereby purging them of those emotions and creating catharsis, resulting into catharsis. He also discusses the 3 different kinds of plots, including simple, complex, and also tragic, and identifies the best kind of tragic plot as one that is both complex and tragic in effect. In the 5th chapter, Aristotle turns his attention to comedy and identifies its purpose and the ridicule of individuals and groups. He distinguishes between 2 types of comedies: the old comedy, which was satirical and political, and the new comedy, which was domestic and focused on everyday life. The 6th chapter is devoted to the concept of epic poetry, which Aristotle defines as a narrative poem that tells the story of a heroic figure. He argues that the essential elements of epic poetry are the same as those of tragedy, with the addition of epic similes and long descriptions. The 7th chapter of Poetics discusses the various components of poetry, including style, metaphor, and also the use of language. Aristotle argues that the language of poetry should be elevated and different from everyday speech. And that metaphor is an essential element of poetic language. In the final chapter, Aristotle offers some general observations about poetry and its place in society. He argues that poetry is an essential component of human culture, that it serves a valuable function in both education and entertainment. Overall, Aristotle's Poetics is an important text in the history of literary criticism, providing a framework of analyzing and understanding works of literature that has been influential for centuries. Its continued relevance today is a kind of testament to its enduring insights and its ongoing impact on the study and appreciation of literature. We should all acknowledge to the fact that Poetics had a profound impact on literary theory and criticism, and it remains a critical text in the field today even. It was the first systematic study. I repeat, it was the first systematic study of poetry, drama, and that it provided a framework for analyzing and understanding these art forms that would influence generations and scholars and writers. Aristotle's ideas about the essential elements of tragedy and comedy, the nature of catharsis, and the role of poetry in society have all had a lasting impact on literary theory and criticism. His emphasis on the importance of plot, character, and language in creating effective literature is still relevant today, and many of his ideas have been incorporated into modern theories of storytelling and narrative structure. This would be all, students. I believe that we have been able to establish a dialogue within the context of the text, that is the Poetics. Thank you very much and have a wonderful time ahead.